Stereotypes do exist, but we have to walk through them with care because they can lead to prejudice and prejudice to racism. Maya Angelou, American memoirist, poet, and civil rights activist. All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right, folks, we're back at it today. I got a couple announcements really quick, just as a reminder. Tuesday night tonight, Wednesday night tomorrow night, and then Thursday night, I will be streaming. Now I'm aiming for 7:30, but I might make some changes. But I think I'm going to do it at 7:30. Why am I streaming that? Like every, you might be asking, like, are you going to stream in the morning? Yes, streaming now, obviously, and I will be streaming tomorrow morning, Thursday morning. But I will not be streaming Friday. We'll get to that in just a moment here. So here's what's going on. I'm in the Rumble Creator Program, and part of that program requires that I have certain amount of hours that I stream and certain amount of hours that I will get watched, and chatters that are in the that are in the live stream. So we're trying to aim for all of that. But more importantly, I will be out Friday because I'm leaving on a trip, and I will not be streaming Friday, and I will not be streaming Monday, and I will not be streaming in between those days because I will be gone to a friend's wedding. And so I just decided, rather than try to pack up all my gear or figure out which gear I can pack up, and you know how I can do a stream, and is the Wi-Fi going to be strong enough, and all this good stuff. I decided, you know what? As it turns out, talking with my wife, she's going to go for like 2 weeks, and she's going to bounce around and visit some old friends of hers with my son, and then I'm actually going to catch up with them this weekend, and we're going to go to a wedding together, and then I'm going to come back. So I'm going to be leaving with a friend Friday, and I'll be coming back on Monday. And since my wife is going to be gone, I was like, oh well, that's a great opportunity to just do a lot of podcasts. So that's what we're going to do. Now, initially, I had intended tonight to do basically tonight, tomorrow night, and Thursday night to do premium streams all 3 nights. I think I'm only going to do that 2 nights, or maybe just one. We will see. There's a lot of topics that I have kind of like in my queue that I would like to talk about tonight. I'm going to discuss the case of the JSO officer who basically, in the video that's going around, looks like he's beating up a guy for just simply not complying over an issue of headlights. And that was here in Jacksonville, Jacksonville Sheriff Office. So I will be discussing that tonight. I watched the viral clip that went around, and immediately I was like, "Whoa, we just beat up people because they don't have their headlights on? Like, are you crazy?" Then I watched the 30-minute press briefing from our sheriff, TK Waters, and then he played. At that, he played the body cam footage, and I watched the body cam footage, and I was like, okay, there is another side to this story. Now, I'm not going to give you all the details of my thoughts, but let's just say neither party necessarily comes out clean in my mind. So I'll be discussing that tonight, and I'll play some of the footage so that we can get, well, an objective perspective on what happened, at least in terms of from the public and what we can ascertain with available information to us. So that's what's going on tonight. Look for that about 7:30, and then probably tomorrow night and maybe Thursday night I will do my premium shows, and then again next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I will be doing double headers basically. I will be streaming in the morning and streaming in the evening. I'm going to take advantage of the family being gone. All right. Like they're gone. And, I could go out to the clubs and party it and live it up, but I'm kind of old. So I'm just going to stream. So that's what we've got going on. All right. So look forward to that. So again, no stream Friday, no stream Monday, nothing going on over the weekend. You won't after Thursday night, you won't see me again until Tuesday morning. Okay. Let's see real quick here. My VA lady says, Liberty Dad. I mean, she probably is not saying it quite like that, but I've got to animate it so that it sounds, more interesting than just, how I might normally read it. Liberty Dad, don't forget to mention that you are this close to the requirements to getting monetized on YouTube, so you will be able to get monthly subscriptions and super chats when that happens. Yes. In fact, I'll give you the numbers if you give me just a moment. I was not prepared for that particular comment, meaning just I didn't have the details up right away, so we can get to that really quickly here. Let's see. I will tell you what we have here. So, the requirements for me to meet that next level, I have to have at least 500 subscribers. It's a small channel, but we're growing. I have 520. So, bam, good to go there. Let's see here. Thank you guys so very much. I need another button for that. I'll figure that out over the weekend maybe. And then I need 3,000 public watch hours, and I currently have just under 2,000. And that's 3,000 for 365 days. So if you're brand new to the channel, go back and watch some of the old stuff and get me some of those hours. Help this channel grow. And by the way, since we're talking about helping the channel grow, if you're watching from Rumble, hop into the chat. If you have an account, hop into the chat and just say hi. Or if you have a question, feel free to ask that. I'll do my best to answer the questions. Or if there's a comment, I'll respond to comments as well. Not all of them, depends on the nature of it and all that good stuff. But yeah, do your best to help me grow this channel, and I will do my best to keep delivering quality insight and ideas from a libertarian perspective and also a dad perspective. All right, let's get into this show here. Before diving into Nick's comments, because we're going to talk about Nick Fuentes, the leader of the Gripers guy. I don't really know much about him. Every time I see stuff, I'm like, whatever. I'm not. But I saw a clip that was going around, and it got like 2 million views on X. So I'm like, all right, well, maybe this is worth discussing. And it talks about race, and I think it's like a 6-minute video. I've chopped it up into several different clips that we'll play, and then I'll kind of give you my thoughts on these. But I figured, race relations are not really where they need to be right now, and I had some issues, with his video, with his comments, and so I'm going to address those, and we're going to do it objectively because that's what we do here on the show. Okay, we're not going to be afraid. There's no topic that I'm afraid to touch. Period. And I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm going to back it up with reason and logic. And then you can either agree or disagree. And if you disagree, that's fine. Perhaps I'm wrong. I mean, probably not. I mean, if you have a podcast that kind of makes you always correct, right? Isn't that how it works? Something like that. Anyway, so a few notes on this. Number one, I think we need to just kind of keep in our mind something called selection bias. And if you're not familiar with it, that's what happens when you see a hand-picked group of examples, which can kind of trick you into thinking that those examples represent the group as a whole. So as an example, I used to watch the libs of TikTok, right? And they would go to TikTok and they would find the crazy liberals, and they would, usually they were teachers, and they were younger teachers, and they had like, colored hair, and they were like, my pronouns are Z, Zim, Zay, whatever, right? And they just and they would just talk crazy. Like they weren't like talking in a way where everybody's like, yeah, that's I could see where a teacher would say that. They were going out of their way to be out of the ordinary. Like I remember one, she was like posting this video, and she's like, oh, my kindergarten class or a first grade or whatever. It was elementary. And she was like, the kids, one kid messed up my pronouns and the other kid corrected her. And it was just so sweet to see. And I'm like, you are a teacher, right? Your job is to teach students, like education. and you over here making videos about how the kids are affirming who you are. You're the teacher. Your job is to teach, not be affirmed by your students. Like that's not how this works, right? But you would see a lot of these videos, and so then you end up thinking like, "Oh my god, every single teacher out there is after my child. They're trying to make my child trans," right? And that's kind of the impression that you got because you were watching this selection bias, this handpicked selection of videos of crazy liberal teachers, elementary teachers specifically. And so then it kind of leaves you watch enough of those videos and you start thinking, man, every teacher must be like this. I better be on guard. My kid might be next, right? It's also selection bias is also the model minority, since we're talking about race today. My wife is Asian and she's an engineer. She's very good at math. And, she will tell you, like, we have in Asian countries, they have their not so good at math people too, right? They have their dumb people as well. You just don't see them because the ones that come over here happen to be the ones that maybe have more means, have had more schooling, so on and so forth. So what we see is not really representative of all Asians. And it's the same for in Southeast Asia, it's same in India, anywhere where you've got a group of people coming over, they're probably going to be, I don't want to say the elite of that group of people, but they are going to potentially be a poor representation of the whole. Okay, not to say that is a bad thing. Obviously, we want people coming over here who are educated and willing to get involved in society in a positive way and stuff like that. But just remember, there are a lot of bad actors. It's like over here, every Indian that I've ever met is like a super nice person. But then you see stories about, violence and assault over in India. And it's like, okay, well, that's not really happening here from Indians. So what's the deal? Well, the deal is that represents a selection bias. If we go by what we see here in the United States and then kind of assume that's how it works in their country, they have their bad eggs just like we do. Another point that I think is worth and this kind of dovetails with a quote you just heard. Stereotypes exist for a reason. And that reason is that enough people have observed or experienced something from a thing or a people or a person to draw a conclusion. Now, the catch is it doesn't necessarily accurately reflect the group as a whole if it's a group, right? It might not. You might have, and since we're going to be talking about race and black folk, perhaps all of your experiences with black folk have been negative. But that doesn't necessarily mean, so you might have the stereotype and say like, okay, black people are just bad people, right? Which is what we're going to get into. But there are plenty of black folk who do not fit that stereotype. So in this particular case, the stereotype does not reflect the whole group necessarily. However, if you jump over and you say, and I love this one from Walter Williams, he's the late economist. Uh, uh, he would talk about discrimination, and he would say, if you open your door one morning to go to work and you saw a tiger sitting in your lawn, you would immediately close that door. And he's like, why? Because you're going to be like, all right, tigers are dangerous. That thing might, come and jump on me, eat me, whatever. He's like, you have this perception about tigers, even though maybe you've never experienced it, you've only heard about it, that they're aggressive and that they will attack people, right? But you don't know if it applies to this particular tiger. This one may be more domestic, not domestic entirely. And so it may be less dangerous than some of the other tigers that you've heard about. But you don't know that, nor do you give it a chance. You shut that door, you call the police, you call whomever, right? And so in that particular case, the stereotype would be largely accurate. You would be hard pressed to find a tiger that's not aggressive. Good luck, But the point being that stereotypes exist because someone or something has experienced something sufficiently to put a conclusion into their mind. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's an accurate one. And the other thing about stereotypes is that, like the quote said, they can lead us to a place of conflict, but they can also lead us to a place of humor, as we'll see later on in this episode. So stereotypes are a very funny thing, right? But they do exist for a reason. You just have to be careful with that reason. Because if you're not careful, it will take you to a place where maybe you've made, because I see this all the time. People are like, I'm just noticing things. That's fine. But sometimes we notice things in a vacuum, right? We might, we don't realize that we're in that vacuum. So I think it's fair to kind of lay that out at first. Okay, last thing before we start watching some of these video clips. There's going to be some unsavory language today. Today's episode is not family friendly, okay? And I could have went through and bleep things out, but we're all adults here. I generally keep the show family friendly. Today it's not. Okay. So my language may slip because I'm watching these videos and I may have something to say that's, you know, whatever. And these videos, they're just not going to be family friendly. So I'm giving you fair warning since that's generally the nature of the show. So let's start with this clip, and all these clips are in order. So, like, there was like a 7-minute clip of him talking, and I just cut it up into sections that I thought I could have a conversation about. So let's get into it. All right, first video here. Let's see. Make sure. Bam.
Growing up, I was confused as to why my stepdad would call my brothers and I African Americans when we do some dumb shit, but now that I'm older, I realize why. I'm black, by the way. Love you, Nick.
Okay, so I'm gonna pause it real quick. So the rest of the videos are not that fast. Okay, he just played it super fast. I will read it again just to make sure that you heard. Somebody called in or somebody sent a chat in and said, "Growing up, I was confused to why my stepdad would call my brothers and I, and then it looks like he's got the word bleeped out. I assume the word is niggers, not niggas. And he says, when we do some dumb shit. But now that I'm older, I realize why. I'm black, by the way. So in other words, one of his audience members has said, like, look, I'm black, and my stepdad would use this term to describe us when we were doing bad things. So this is setting the tone, or this is kind of setting the stage for everything else that he has to say in all these clips. Okay, so that's just what's going on. So let's hear what he has to say starting off.
That's funny. It must suck being one of the good black people and like your race is synonymous with like doing something badly. Like if you're doing like a contracting job and you say like, hey, don't nigger that up. It means like to like do it really poorly, like you didn't give a shit. It's like synonymous with like, I don't care enough to do what I'm doing the right way. Like I don't care. I'm like,
okay, so this is kind of weird. Starting off, I'm not gonna lie, because he's like laughing. He's like, it must suck to be one of the good ones. So he presents it as if one of the good ones is a rare thing. And I see this a lot. Like a lot of people make these comments and they're like, oh, all black people this or black people this, I'm afraid of black people, blah, blah. And I think he mentions that later on in the show, or later on in his clips. And it's like I follow some black folk and they've asked explicitly, they're like, for my non-black followers, do you feel safe or, unsafe when you're around black people just in general in public? And, like some people were like, well, yeah, I'm afraid to wear red or blue because you know, I might get shot. And I'm like, dude, for starters, is this the 90s? Like if you said that in the 90s, I suppose that might make more sense, especially if you lived in a major city like Los Angeles. But for just a typical person today, 2025, that seems kind of weird to say because I wear red shirts and blue shirts all the time and, just plain red or blue. And I never have any problem. 47 years, I've never had somebody tell me, oh, you're wearing the wrong colors when I'm just wearing normal attire. Now, one time when I was a young guy and out running with the wrong crowd, we had some bandanas on, and we did have a black fellow come up to us and say, he was very polite, actually, strikingly, given the conversation here. He was very polite and he was like, look, guys, I don't know you guys, but I just want to say you're going to have to remove those colors so we don't have any problems. And we were like, all right, because we're like, we just thought we were being cool. We were being stupid. Okay. Um, but that's the only time. And I was explicitly wearing something in an explicit way to kind of suggest that I might be part of this group. And somebody who was part of the group said, "Nah, we don't know you." But outside of that, I've never had a situation where I'm wearing the wrong color, just normal wearing. So I think that's kind of weird. But he's laughing. He's like, "Oh, you must be one of the good ones." Now I talk about this all the time, and I say the idea of you're one of the good ones is actually a positive. It doesn't seem that way to a lot of people, but it actually is, because what that means is that somebody is recognizing that they have some stereotype in their mind that is now being challenged by at least one person. And that's how it starts, right? Like when I was growing up, you might like gay people, black people, like any kind of minority group. A lot of people would say something like, "Oh, you're one of the good ones. You're one of the good gays. You're one of the good blacks," and it was generally taken as an insult, and to some degree, it is. But to some degree, it's actually a positive when you look at it correctly, because what that means is somebody has recognized that whatever stereotype they have in their mind does not apply to all, even if not applying to all is only one. Okay. But that's still a positive, because guess what happens? Then they run into a second black person or gay person or whomever that they like. And they go, "Wow, there's two of them." And then two leads to three. And then eventually their worldview has to reconcile. Man, I've got this stereotype in my mind, but I keep running into people that don't fit that stereotype. And I have, like, you pick any stereotype for any group, and I could probably name several somebodies that do not fit that stereotype, right? And I could name some people that probably do. Like if you say, "Hey," like he's talking about black people not wanting to do a good job. I've met black folk that don't do a good job. Maybe maybe they're lazy. Maybe they're just not good workers. Like this is not really the line of work for you. I've also met some white folk, met some Hispanic folk. I've met all kind of folk, right? That aren't good at their job, whatever their job is. And you're like, "Dude, what the heck?" I've met white people. Like my when we were this house, when we were having it renovated, the first contractor we had come in, it was a lot of money on the line. It was like $20,000 or something crazy, right? To get the renovation for this house. And we were not happy with the work they were doing. We were not happy with the timeline. And we brought an inspector out. And the guy, if I remember correctly, he was either white or mixed white and Hispanic. I can't remember exactly because it's been a while. Um, but he was on the lighter skin side, but he was either all white or Hispanic. I can't remember. And he was justifying all the work, and we're like, "Dude, we're not happy with this." And then we ended up getting into a yelling match at him with him, and we were cussing at him. We were very angry, right? But he's not a black guy. Okay. So my point here is that we have to be careful, because he's starting to drift into this area of, okay, well, you're one of the good ones because this stereotype exists so much with so many black folk. And I'm like, well, it exists with a lot of folk, actually. Let's continue listening.
So low integrity and just like low moral character that I don't even care in the slightest to do it the right way, because I'm like ontologically evil. Like I'm abusing you. You're paying me to do a job, and I have so little honor and integrity that I'm gonna like that I don't even care about those things. I don't even care that I'm gonna do an embarrassingly bad job. It must suck to be synonymous with that. Not all black people are that way. It's just they're kind of known for that. White people do that too. Hispanic people do that too. It's a shame. I really do believe. Look, I don't.
Okay. So it's kind of interesting because he admits now that, like, hey, this happens from other people. Black people are known for this. So again, he's kind of getting into a stereotype. And so the question is, when he says black people are known for this, how accurate is it to say this is a trait of black folk? And I will tell you this. I worked at a company that had a disproportionate number of black women. And let me tell you something. They were killing it. They were knowledgeable. They did their jobs. They did it well. The women that were training me did a fabulous job, showing me the ropes, showing me, what I needed. And this was a corporate office environment. Okay. But it was disproportionately black. Like there was more black folk in this particular building with this particular company than you would find out in the regular population. And so, like, he's like, well, okay, the question I would ask Nick if he were on the show would be, how many black people have you worked with and in what capacity? And then how many black people have done their job and went under the radar? See, that's the thing that we have to consider is that if somebody does a bad job, it probably sticks out in your mind. If somebody does the job the way they're supposed to, it probably doesn't. Think about it in terms of a restaurant. If I go to a restaurant and I have a server, the server brings me my food and they're pretty prompt about it. And they ask good questions, like, hey, how was your food? So on and so forth. All right, I answer it. But if there was nothing remarkable about it, there's nothing significantly negative, nothing significantly good about it, right? Like they were just standard expected service. I'm going to leave and I will probably forget all about them, right? So now they're not even in my mind. But if I go there and I have a very negative interaction or a very positive interaction, I'm going to be thinking about it. I might be like, man, that person was terrible waitress or waiter, terrible. Or I might say, man, they were fabulous, man. I really had a great experience. And I've had both. Okay. And I can remember some of those stories. But man, I really can't tell you too many stories of restaurant experiences that I've had that were just normal, everyday, whatever it is. Just can't think of too many. Right? Because we're expecting it, so it ends up going under the radar. So it doesn't fit when we're thinking about all these things. So now if I have negative experiences, like if I have a certain amount of negative experiences and I focus on those, then that may become my the stereotype that I build in my mind, even at the expense of competing information. So I just think it's worth pointing out. Let's listen to it.
Oh, I think black people are not irredeemable, but there just needs to be brutal honesty. It's like, look, these black people are really struggling and they're turning into these maniacs. It seems like they don't do anything right. They're obnoxious, they're rude, they're inconsiderate, aggressive, cruel. Look, nobody hates black people for being black. If there are people like that, I think that's exceedingly rare.
Okay, fair point. Like I agree that most people are probably thinking in line of behavior. And I think this goes to the quote that I gave you at the beginning of the show, and I'll repeat it again. Stereotypes do exist. We have to walk through them with care because they can lead to prejudice and prejudice to racism. So we have to be careful with stereotypes. And then I kind of follow that up talking about stereotypes and saying, hey, they exist for a reason. That doesn't necessarily mean they're accurate. They don't necessarily reflect the whole group. They might. And when I say reflect the whole group, I mean largely, not like I don't think a stereotype ever fits an entire group 100%. But you might see some stereotypes where it's largely pretty accurate. And then you might see some where you're like, well, I've had that experience, but my experience has otherwise been outweighed by something else, something to the contrary. And so that creates a bit of a conflict in people's minds, I think. All right. But I do agree. The idea of any group not being irredeemable, that's true. I agree with him on that. And I agree that I think most people try to judge things based on their experience and their observation. And I think where they go wrong is they get into selection bias and they start applying more of that inappropriately to the larger group as a whole. I think that's where you start getting into prejudice and you get into racism. And then, of course, there are people that are just flat racist. They're just like, oh, I hate black people. Am I going to get that clipped? Don't clip that. If you clip that, I'm going to get you. But the point being here, I think if we're going to be brutally honest, I'm going to say that some of what Nick has to say in his clips are nonsense. Some of it's out of ignorance, and there is some truth to some of it. And we're going to try to walk through it. So let's go to the next clip here. Where we go here? Lost my place. All right, so we're gonna go to this next clip here, and I'm just gonna say, um, let's see here. I've got some commentary in here. Should I address it? Yeah, I'm going to address it now, I guess. So, Annie W., thank you for joining, says, why do we have to enjoy blacks or gays or anything like that? This is our country, not theirs. Okay, so I'm going to make an assumption here. And I'm going to assume, Annie, that you are white. Um, and I'm just going to point out that my ancestry is Native American. So, if we want to talk about whose country this is, well, I have the leg up. So just want to point that out. At this point in time, though, maybe the country once was Native American and maybe once was white because they controlled it. But that's not where we are now. And societies change, whether you like it or not. And they change not just because, not necessarily for bad reasons, but they change because people change. Right? Like once upon a time, people said, "Hey, slavery was okay," and then some people were like, "You know what? Maybe it's not okay," and so they decided to get rid of it. Right? And then we had this big argument, battle, etc. You know, and then we came out and we said, "All right, we're done with slavery." Right? And libertarians, I know you're going to want to be like, "Wow, we still got taxes." Let's focus on the topic at hand. So, if we're going to talk about laying claim, I just want to point out that unless you're Native American, chances are you don't really have much of a claim to the country. But even if you are, that claim is long since passed. That's not where we are, whether you like it or not. Whether the history getting here was good or bad, it doesn't matter. We're here now, right? And we're going to talk more about that in a minute because we're going to talk about accountability and all this other stuff. So let's get into this next clip. I'm trying to address comments a little bit more timely sometimes, at least when the comments maybe are, reflecting particular points in the show. Normally I do that right before my intermission. But let's continue.
The reason that people have negative attitudes about black people is because most people's interactions with black people are negative. Most people's interactions with black people is when you're stuck in traffic and you see a Nissan Altima speeding down the shoulder. And you say, what the fuck? You're not supposed to do that. But it's like these people have no respect for decorum. They think the rules don't apply to them. They have no respect for society. Their interaction is they are a waiter and they wait on a black table and the black people don't tip and they're fucking rude. They go to the DMV and they see a black person behind the counter and they say, oh, here we go. And the person's rude. It just goes to show people are not racist. It goes to show people don't like people that are rude.
Okay, I agree. People don't like people that are rude. And there are black folk who are rude, right alongside of white folk who are rude. So speaking of the DMV, that's kind of a funny, because I literally just a month ago, I had to go, not to the DMV, but I had to go to the courthouse because I got pulled over. I got a citation. We didn't update our registration. So I got a citation. And then I set it to the side and then paper started coming in and sitting on top of it. And then I forgot about it. And then something happened. I think I just remembered about it. And I was like, oh, I better go check on that. And I went to go online and pay my citation. And it was like, nope, you got to come in. And I was like, oh, crap. I got to go in. They're probably going to suspend my license. So I go in and I get my number. I sit down. I wait. And they call for my number. And they call it twice. So they called it once and I was like, oh, I think they called my number. So I listened for a second time. Yep, they called it. So I get ready to go up and some woman, a white woman, jumped the line and just ran up and basically took, the spot that I was supposed to have. Now I was with my son at the time and I was trying, I'm trying not to show him that daddy can be rude in public. And so I just kind of let it go. I was like, okay, whatever. Because I was annoyed to have to be there in the first place. And then I'm annoyed that you jumped the line because I know darn well you didn't have the number because I literally had it in my hand. And so I'm getting ready, I'm like, all right, I've got two options. Say something, which means I'm probably going to be rude about it, or just let it go. And I was like, I'm just going to let it go, whatever. I'll just spend some time with my son here. So the woman leaves. I go up and well, first, while she's up at the counter, I go up to the lady that's at the entrance and I said, hey, this woman jumped the line. how do you want me to handle this? Because my number's not going to get called again. And she said, I will send the teller a message and let her know that she's got somebody coming right after. I was like, okay, cool. So then that woman leaves after, and I go up. It's a black woman, right? So I'm supposed to have a negative experience because it's a black woman. Now, what I did not do was go, oh, here we go again. I'm going to get to that. I didn't say that. I didn't say anything in my mind. I just was annoyed that this woman had jumped the line. So I go up to the black woman who is now the teller, and I said, excuse me. I said, the woman over there said she sent you a message. The woman you just were talking with jumped the line. I was actually the one with the number. And she goes, oh man. She goes, I am so sorry. She goes, I wish you would have said something. I would have told that woman to sit down. Oh, so that's not a negative experience. That sounds like I missed out on a positive experience where this black woman would have been like, look, lady, sit down. You jumped the line. This man has his ticket. Go sit your butt down. Right? Like I missed out on a positive one, but I didn't have a negative one. I guess you could say it was kind of positive. She was really nice and she was very helpful. And we got it all straightened out. So I think it's kind of interesting that part of his commentary includes, oh, here we go again. So I used to be in sales. I hated it, by the way. I'm not a good salesperson. So I used to be in sales. And the one thing that they taught you, they said, never, ever, ever prejudge somebody. Because what it does is it changes how you interact with them. So they said, if you see a guy come in and he's wearing dirty clothes and maybe he even smells a little bit and he hasn't shaven and he doesn't have a good haircut, you might look at him and go, man, this dude doesn't have any money, and you're just going to ignore him. And they said, that could be a dude that has more money than you. They said, you don't know. You cannot take that risk. So they said, you treat every person as if they have a lot of money, maybe more than you. And then what happens is you will be a better salesperson for that, because the way that you think about this person going into the interaction is going to change how you engage with that person, which in turn, what does that do? If you said that changes how they interact with you, please go to the head of the class. Because if you walk in and you go, oh, black person at the teller, here we go again. Guess what? You've already started off on the wrong foot. You have kind of initiated, in a sense, any potential problem that you might have with this person. Now, it's possible that they could be rude for any number of reasons, right? Maybe they're just a bad person. Maybe they've been dealing with tough customers all day, right? And I've experienced that. And it's funny that we're having this conversation because like every time I think of an instance, it's never a black person. And I'm not saying that black people are never rude or bad. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, I think people have selection bias. I think they're forgetting about the negative, instances where somebody cut them off on the road and it was a white guy. Somebody pulled some weird stunt driving down the shoulder or whatever, and it was not a black person, but you probably forgot about it. More than likely because it didn't really involve you in the first place. Right. So I think a lot of Nick's problems, a lot of people's problems that associate with his ideas, I think a lot of their problems is they have it in their mind about people already. So they're starting the conversation, if you will. They're starting it off on a negative foot and they're going, see, I'm right. This was a black person. I said black people are rude and this person was rude to me. And they might totally forget that they walked into it with this negative attitude in the first place. And so they set the tone for the conversation, right? You have a lot of power to drive a conversation. And I talk about this all the time to my libertarian peers. I tell them, I say, look, your job is to communicate ideas. You need to learn how to communicate. And you can do a lot. You can disarm people that are being rude. I've done it myself. My wife did it. I'll tell you a story real quick and then we'll go to the next clip. So my wife is in real estate. She's a real estate agent and investor. And she has a lot of contractors in her phone book that she works with. And there's one guy, He's a white dude. He's actually a really nice guy. You just gotta deal with his heavy Republican, ranting sometimes. He'll come in and be like, oh, like when Obama was president, he was like, oh, Obama did this, blah, blah, blah. He's not really racist. He's just super duper like hardcore right wing Republican. But he's a nice guy and he does a great job. He works very well. So my wife is on the phone with him, and she's Asian, and this is during COVID, and she's trying to get in, like his opinion on his HVAC and his opinion on HVAC or something like that. And then he makes this comment kind of off this. He's like, COVID, blah, blah, blah. It needs to stay over there. And he's like, I don't care if a million Chinese people die, just as long as it doesn't come over here. Okay. Now my wife is ethnically Chinese. She's Indonesian, but she's ethnically Chinese. And she could have taken offense to that. And she could have been like, I'm never working with you again, you racist bigot. But what she did, and this is more of a natural thing for her, she didn't do it like necessarily on purpose. She wasn't trying to drive the conversation. It's just her personality. She said, now so and so, we should care when anybody dies, right? And he's like, well, yeah, you're right. And like her one comment dialed down the conversation from his end. She wasn't the one that was animated. He was. And she made one single question. And then it kind of disarmed the whole conversation, and he dialed it down and chilled out. And I know this because she happened to have him on speakerphone, and I was listening. I was sitting right there. And I was just like, and I did a podcast episode on this, like way, way back. Okay. So like the way that you engage, the way that you think about people can really set the tone just as much as maybe they're just a bad egg that hasn't learned how to behave properly or doesn't care or whatever, right? Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they generally can behave pretty well. I'm talking about a person, not a group, but maybe a particular person is generally pretty good person. But on this particular day, they're having a bad day. And then you come along and you're like, oh my God, it's a black person. I'm going to have a negative experience, right? So great. Now you're walking into it with a negative attitude. And then guess what? Guess what ends up happening? They're going to probably be rude. You're going to maybe be rude back. You're going to have a sour experience, and you're going to walk off and you're going to be like, yeah, those black people, just every time I meet with one, they confirm, what my views are. No, what ended up happening is this person in this particular scenario that I'm making up, they might have otherwise been a good person that you would have appreciated, but you don't know that because you walked into it with your own negative attitude, with your own problems, and you brought them in, and then you made even a further mess of a situation that might not have been the best, right? It, as the saying goes, it takes two to tango. All right, let's get to this next video clip here. I'm going to try to go through these and not be too long.
People want to be treated with consideration and respect. And it is true that black people are, in this day and age, unfortunately, seem to have very low moral character. It's not even just the violence, although the violence is pretty striking. If you live your life and you know that you're going to be mugged by black people, it kind of colors your opinion or perception of black people, wouldn't you say?
Okay. Yes. If you know you're going to be mugged by a black person, then yeah, that would color your perspective. However, the data says that most crime tends to be black on black, white on white. So most black criminals are perpetrating against black victims, right? Or let me put it this way. Most black victims are perpetrated by fellow black people. Same goes for whites. There is crossover, and it does happen. Okay. So the idea that you can just know that you're going to get mugged by a black person, I don't know where he's getting that. Now he lives in Chicago and he starts talking about it, which is funny because we all just had an enjoyment watching Shameless, which is a bunch of white people acting every bit exactly like what he's talking about. And let me tell you, I've been in plenty of hoods before, plenty of like low income areas. I promise you, white folk, they can act just as terrible as black folk. I promise you, I've seen it. Trailer parks, just bad areas of town. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've had way more I'll put it this way. I'm willing to put money down that I have way more experiences with bad eggs in our society than most of the people complain. I'm willing to bet that my experiences will trounce the experiences that Nick has had. I'm willing to bet. And the reason I say that, and I don't watch him a lot, so I could be wrong, but whenever I do happen to catch something that he says, he doesn't really talk about his experience. He doesn't say, well, you know what? The reason I believe this is because, every time I went out, he's like, every time people go out, he's generalizing. And so he's making these generalizations about groups of people that are experiencing this. He's generalizing what white people are experiencing about black people or with black people, but he's not really telling you like his experiences and saying like, this is why I believe the way I do. When I mentored kids in Richmond, Indiana, some of those kids, they were white. And some of them were like, yeah, the Mexicans around here are just ruining the neighborhood. They didn't exactly live in the nice part of town in the first place. Okay. But they were blaming the Mexican drug dealers. And I was like, wow, that's weird. Because like me and my friends would always go to this Mexican restaurant that was really popular in that town, full of Mexicans. They were always super duper nice, right? I worked at places in that same town where a lot of Mexicans would work, and they were all super nice, hard workers. When I worked at Rent-A-Center, my best customers literally were Mexican. I think they might have been illegal because they always paid on time and they never gave us any trouble. So I think they might have been illegal in trying to stay under the radar, right? Maybe, I don't know, but it's just interesting, like when we say like where is it that you're getting these generalizations from? Are they at least your own experiences, or are they experiences that you're trying to vicariously live through someone else that you don't even know specifically? Like, or are you extrapolating and saying, well, I know a guy that had a bad experience, and then you extrapolate that to become the norm or some sort of generalization that you can draw upon? That's what I think is going on here. But he's not really telling you any of his own stories. So I'm not sure that he's actually experienced it. And I don't agree with this most interactions, because I have ran the streets and I've been in places that I shouldn't have been in, some of them were heavily black areas. I've been to schools that were mostly black. And I can tell you, I cannot today at 47 say most of my interactions with black people have been negative. Most of them have either been positive or just run of the mill, like no big deal, right? Like they're not necessarily negative. They're not necessarily positive. They just are. You're like, you walk by somebody and you're like, hi. I mean, I guess you could look at that and you could say that's a positive experience, but I'm thinking like something that sticks out in your mind, positive. Most of them are just normal. I've had multiple black people on the show and they're great. No problems. I've had Maj Touré. I've had Jeff Charles. I'm trying to remember this other guy. I had him a long time ago. He was on my Dad Talk series. He came on the show. Great guy. As the chair of the Libertarian Party here in Duval, when I was the chair, we had a black candidate, super duper smart guy. Like we all joked and called him the professor. Because like the dude, we actually had to tell him, we were like, dude, you need to dial it down on the academic talk. You sound way too smart to be talking to. Like, stop it. Talk black. No, I'm just kidding. We didn't say that, but you get the point. Like we were like, hey man, you are talking so sophisticated. Like sometimes I don't even understand what you're saying, and I like to think that I'm a relatively smart guy, so my experiences have been positive or at least neutral. I don't, and some of the negative ones have been relatively negative, but not always. Anyway, I could wax on and on and on and on. I could probably do a 4-hour show talking about experience after experience after experience, because I'm gonna tell you, I've lived quite a life. It's been a fun one. All right, let's continue listening.
If 99% of the carjackings and stabbings and shootings that you see in Chicago are by black people, when you're walking down the street late at night, guess what you're looking for? Black people. And you equate that with danger.
Okay.
People want to be treated with consideration and respect.
Apologies for that. I didn't mean to restart that. Okay. So there is a little bit of truth to this. And what I'm saying is there is some truth that people will look at data, they'll look at statistics, they'll say, hey, there's a lot of crime here, and a lot of it appears to be black folk, right? Maybe they don't dig into the numbers and determine, okay, it is exactly black folk that are largely the problem here, but they may get some numbers that kind of make that assumption, okay? And they might walk down the street and they might say, you know what? If it's 10 o'clock at night and, it's dark and I see some black guys walking down the street, they might be slightly intimidated, right? But here's the catch. A lot of times, almost all the time, it's going to be if you see a young black male. So I'll tell you a quick story. Years ago in the developer community, I was reading somebody's blog post and she was going on about the first time she realized that she was a racist. It was a kind of bizarre and stupid article, but something kind of stuck with me. She said she was walking down the street and she saw some young black men that were kind of cutting up and laughing and doing whatever, walking toward her. And she just kind of moved to the side slightly and then kind of held her purse a little bit tighter. And then she realized later, she was like, oh my God, I'm a racist. And I was like, well, maybe not. And she was like, and she's like, because would I have done that with it if they were white? And I'm like, perhaps not, but perhaps you would have. If you saw some white guys that were cutting up and carrying on, had a lot of tattoos, and maybe gave you the impression that they were looking for trouble, you would have done the same thing. But here's the more important part, and why I point out young black male. When it comes to making observations about the world, I think what we fail to do is consider age. Because in this particular woman's story, she was concerned with a young black male, but I was like, but if you'd seen an old black man walking by in a suit, would you have, clutched your purse? Probably not. If you saw an old black lady who looked like she just left church, she had one of the big hats, with flowers or whatever. I think that's still a thing. I don't know. Was when I was growing up. But if you saw that, and she was wearing a dress and she was walking, would you be like, oh my God, I better hug my purse? No, you wouldn't. Because there's more even to people's own prejudices that I don't think that they're looking at. So when you look at violence, when you look at crime, it's certainly not all black people, for sure, for starters, but it also, in terms of like percentage wise, but even more to the point, it's kind of a narrow subgroup within the black community. You are talking about young men. Yeah, I mean, you got some women out there too. I mean, we've seen the street fights on YouTube, right? So there are some young black women. But if you're looking at somebody who's older, who's my age, who's like 47, they're walking down the street, chances are you don't give it a second thought. So I think people need to temper their biases, their stereotypes, or maybe even their racism, however you want to define it. And you need to start going, is there something else at play here? Is something else causing me this concern? All right, I'm running behind time, so let me get to some more, another video here, another clip, trying to go through it. Boom.
Well, you are just loaded up with hatred and racism. It's like, I'm really not. I'm a really friendly person. But if I'm someplace and I see some black person walking in with their pants sagging and they can't articulate what their problem is or what they need, and they're rude and they're aggressive, and I'm in fear for my life, like, yeah, I have a problem with all of that.
Okay. Dang it, I keep doing that. Didn't mean to do that. Okay, fair. I get it. Okay? And when I say fair, I don't mean he's right, per se. What I'm saying is, if you believe that a situation is dangerous, then you're going to have a problem with it, right? But what I think we're missing are other components of this. So if you, when I was mentoring a young kid, we went to a restaurant, a favorite restaurant. It was almost entirely black. I was not bothered by it. Why? Nobody was really being aggressive. People seemed to be pretty nice. They were just chatting. It looked like they had all just gotten out of church, right? It was just a nice restaurant. It was like after church. And so there's a bunch of people in there. Most of them were black. I was like me and him were like the only ones that weren't black. And he asked me, because he lived in the part of town where it was largely black. And he was like, dude, are you uncomfortable? I was like, no, like, I'm fine. Whatever. Yeah, I can handle myself. I've been in way more dangerous situations than a restaurant full of black people. Okay. But I think we have to start evaluating our own biases, because I think they lead us astray and they lead us into thinking things that are inaccurate. And this is what I mean. Like, I try to evaluate the world and just try to think of everything in full context, but I think that's not the norm. And I don't do it as well. I mean, I have my own biases, and I do things incorrectly, and I have wrong assumptions. And so like we all have them. So it's not like I'm a level above everybody else per se. But because I do this show and because I like talking about the world around me, I'm more prone to thinking about things in a broader manner. And I'm more prone to, okay, yeah, I did have an experience with a black person that was negative, or a Hispanic person that was negative, or a white person that was negative. But how does that compare to all the other experiences that I've had? And I will weigh those out. And I will say that for most people, they probably are not doing that. Now, there might be a few people who the circumstances have led them to have largely real negative experiences with black folk or Hispanic or white folk or whatever. That does happen. So I'm not denying that it happens. And I'm not denying that people feel what they feel, right? Everybody has their own feelings. You can't stop that. But what you can do is you can evaluate what information that you are working with that leads you to those feelings. My mother used to tell me feelings lie. Like I've had friends where we're laughing it up one moment, the next moment we want to punch each other in the face. We hate each other. But is that really my feeling, or am I just mad in the moment? Right? Same concept applies. Right? Like when you feel what you feel, you may be nervous in the moment, but you have to ask yourself, have you judged the situation properly? Have you allowed your biases to really be challenged to make sure that whatever conclusion you're getting to is accurate? Have you done that? And I say, for the most part, not so much. Okay, let's get some more comments here. Now we're going to get to the comment music, and then we're going to go to a break, and then we're going to come back and finish up the show. So let's see. Looks like Annie is dominating the chat here. We've got Jake. Let's see. I'm going to try not to jump into conversations that you guys are having. Let's see. But let's see here. Let's see here. Let's see. Spiritual Eurasianists. I don't know what that means. Hispanics aren't intimidating. LOL. I'm not intimidated by Hispanics. Not intimidated by black people. I assume you're addressing that to me. I'm not intimidated by white people. I'm actually not intimidated by much of anybody, even though I'm 5'3" and I weigh 120 pounds. And that's because I've seen more than my fair share of drama on the streets. Okay, let's just leave it at that. S. Raznick says, hi. Hello. How are you? Thanks for joining. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see here. Wow, you are the same guy begging for us to stop being racist. It's not going to be. I'm not begging anybody to stop being racist. If you're talking to me, I'm not begging anybody at all. I'm just saying, like, here are my thoughts. Take them or leave them. Right. And I think everybody should challenge what they think they know about the world. Everybody. Because we all have some incorrect assumptions. And by the way, I will say this. I don't have the clip. I wish I did. Those assumptions go both ways, right? Those assumptions go even toward white people. So I in the past, I've done a show where I was talking about Dia Khan, and she is a document. She's a Muslim, a British Muslim woman that did a documentary, White Right Meeting the Enemy, I believe is the name of it. And she actually met with self-avowed white supremacists. So this isn't the, oh, you're a white supremacist nonsense. This is people that said they were a white supremacist. Okay. And she met with one guy here in Jacksonville, actually. And then he actually started warming up to her. She's got him on film where he's like, yeah, we're going to go drop these pamphlets off in the Jew neighborhoods. And I don't like homosexuals and I don't like Muslims and I don't like blacks. And he's like, I only like white people. Like he's on record saying all this stuff. And he had like swastika tattoos and whatnot here in Jacksonville. And he raised a bit of a storm with some pictures that he took and posted online years ago. Well, she started having a conversation with him and he warmed up to her. And later she was on Russell Brand's podcast and she was talking about this. And she said, she goes through that interaction. She goes, I realized that my assumptions about him were also kind of incorrect because she assumed that because he was a racist and self-avowed racist and supremacist and all that good stuff, that he would not be able to have a meaningful conversation with her. And she realized that she had a flat caricature of him. And until she met him and started talking to him, like they couldn't resolve those differences in their mind. So they both had prejudices about the other person. It goes both ways. So yes, I think people should address their prejudices, their biases, their ideas that they have in mind. Am I trying to get you to stop being racist? I mean, kinda. Am I going to beg you? No, that's your problem. But I am going to lay it out for you. I am America's most objective libertarian, and I will tell you the truth as best as I understand it. And you can take it or leave it. End of story. Let's see. Again, I assume that you're talking to me, but maybe sometimes it's hard to tell if you guys are chatting amongst yourselves in the conversation or if you're directing it at me. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay. So I've never had a bad experience with a black. I just have eyes and a brain. Yes. And that eyes and a brain has to include the experiences that you've not had and potentially the experiences that you've had that were positive. Right? That's part of having eyes and a brain. So I get it. We're all observing. We're all noticing things. That's fine. Make sure you don't leave out the things that maybe are contradictory to what you're noticing. Notice those things too. And what I notice, speaking of noticing, what I've observed is that most people have a tendency to leave those elements out. They leave out the positive ones or the ones that are neutral because, like I said earlier, they go under the radar because you don't think much about them. If I go to the store and a cashier is like, dude, hurry up, get up here, I'm going to be like, man, what a terrible person, right? But if she's like, hi, sir, how you doing? And I go, hi, I'm fine. How are you? And she goes, okay. And I walk off. I'm not going to think twice about it. But that was not a negative experience. But it does go in the bucket of not negative experiences. It may not go in the positive experience bucket, but it goes into the not negative experience. And so I have to weigh that experience with the negative ones that I've had. If you're not doing that, well, flat out, you're wrong. Let's see. What else? A lot of new people in the chat. Let's see. Betrayer says, I missed most of the show. Are you a libertarian? Do you not believe in the concept of race or believe that NJF is off the mark in some fashion? Nick J. Fuentes. It took me a second. Okay, so yes, I am a libertarian. I do believe in the concept of race, actually. And I think that Nick is off in some sense. And we're going to get to a little bit more. I think there are some things that he says that are accurate, but I think they need to be tempered with other things that are also accurate. You know, if every day my wife says good morning to me and I don't think much of it, and then one day she's like, God, you're annoying, because she's in a bad mood, which she doesn't say that, but let's just say we're pretending. Let's say I have a negative experience and I focus on that negative experience. That one may cloud my mind and may push out all the positive experiences or the very neutral ones. This is what I'm getting at. I'm just pointing out that, you know, you can't just go, yeah, there's some good ones too, and then move on to continuing to talk about all the negative experiences. What you talk about the most is what you're going to focus on. It's going to give you selection bias. It's going to lead you to believe more a situation is more pronounced than it might actually be. That's what I'm getting at. Let's see. Hey, Jake, laugh if you want. Nobody else can say they have this title of most objective libertarian. I'll stack up my creds against anybody any day. Let's see. All right. We're going to go to intermission. I will be right back. Clear my throat, get a little something to drink, but see you in a moment. Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe. Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. If you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for dads. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, there, kind of boloed that a little bit, but that's okay. Every once in a while, I just don't hit the right controls the right way. So it is what it is. All right. Anyway, so we're continuing on in this clip. It's about a 6-minute clip. I cut it up into about 5 different parts. Let's go to this next video and we'll see what I have to say about that. I've got 3 more videos. 2 of them are Nick. 1 is a bit of a surprise. So let's see what we got here.
It just bothers me in this damn ass city because that's all it is in Chicago is just these black people who can never take accountability. It's always somebody else's fault. Same thing with Candace. You know, when I was debating with Candace, it was like, why are black people poor? Some white person, Lyndon Johnson. White people wrote history books. White people colonized them. White people did the Clinton Foundation. White people did. It's like, where's the accountability? Where's the humility? But they have no humility. They're so proud. There's nothing wrong necessarily with being proud of who you are, but you have to be in touch with reality.
All right. I agree. We need to be in touch with reality. Reality. I was looking at the word accountability. We have to be in touch with with reality. And reality includes our own selves. Okay. So I didn't watch his episode with Candace Owens. Just based on what he's talking about, I assume that Candace Owens was talking about a lot of the policies that were put forward by liberal people in the 70s. That's my assumption. I could be wrong on that. I'm going to operate on that assumption since I don't know any better. There are policies that do affect groups more or less negatively. We have to address those. But he is also correct that people have to take accountability. And I've talked about this before. I've said, look, I told the teenager that I was working with years ago, he would be like, well, you know, this isn't my fault. This isn't my fault. This is my fault. And I'm like, okay, look, there's too many of those. You're saying it's way too much. Like, in fact, maybe it isn't your fault. Maybe none of it is. Right. But at the end of the day, you're the one that has to deal with it. So you have to figure it out. Like if I were to get fired from my job because maybe they just needed to cut some heads. Okay. Maybe I'm doing a good job, but they're like, you're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole here. So we're going to let you go. Okay. I could say it's not my fault, but I'm still the one that's unemployed. So I agree with him in a sense that yes, people do need to take accountability, but that also means everybody, right? So if there are policies that were put into place that have had a negative impact, then yes, the people that implemented those policies or the people that haven't removed those policies, they need to deal with them and they need to have some accountability and say, these policies are contributing. Now, you have your own responsibility to deal with, right? Everybody has their own responsibility. So like, I'll give you a good example that kind of is about black people, but kind of not. It's not about American black people. So there was a thing going around about Haitians a while back, and some of my peers up in New Hampshire were hammering, and I did a whole episode on this, but they were hammering on the whole IQ and how they have, you know, Haitians have lower IQ, and you know that's why they can't feed themselves and they can't do this and they can't do that, blah 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 blah. Well, the truth is that's actually not always been the case. If you look back in history, you can see that there are policies that the U.S. has implemented that explicitly destroyed things that they were able to do that they're not able to do now or that they don't do as well. So, for instance, rice was one of them. It used to be the case that Haiti was growing so much rice they could export it. Today, they can barely feed themselves. Okay. So you have to ask yourself, when I say look at the whole picture, you have to ask yourself, why would Haiti be able to, in 1 century, be able to grow rice enough so that they had extra and they could export it, but then in another century, all of a sudden they're not able to, and they seem to have low IQs. If we can even if we can even accept that the low IQ is accurate. Like I don't know if we're actually going over there and administering IQ test. I don't know how this information came to be. I'm going with it as is. Okay, so that question has to be answered. Like, how does this happen? Well, as it turns out, the United States, they wanted to get into exporting rice. And so what they did was they subsidized our rice farmers such that the rice farmers in Haiti could not compete. And so it basically drove them out of business. Okay. And eventually you lose institutional knowledge because nobody's farming rice. So now you got to figure it out all over again. Okay. The second policy was there was swine flu or some sort of swine disease. And the US said, you need to kill all of your swine, and convinced Haiti to do it. So they did. And then the US said, but you need swine because you got to eat. So we said, we're going to send you some of our pigs. That sounds pretty nice. Like, hey, you kill them, we'll send you some, and great, we'll all move along, right? Well, it didn't turn out so well because what ended up happening is the pigs that we sent them were not suitable for that environment, the climate. So what happened? They all died. So now you have two US policies that have disrupted what once was a capable people, or at least capable enough. I mean, maybe I'm not going to say that Haiti was ever like, a super paradise of like everything great in the world, but they were at least sustaining themselves. And then the US came along. So yes, sometimes there are external reasons for a situation, but that doesn't mean that we can just go, yeah, it's your responsibility and nobody else has to account for it. No, everybody in the process has to account for it. So at the end of the day, Haitians, they have to figure their stuff out, right? They've got to figure out what they need to do in order to regain their ability to export rice and to have pigs and whatever else, right? They got to figure that out. The US has to be accountable for its actions in causing that problem, in disrupting what was once a capable enough people. Same thing goes in the US. Thomas Sowell has talked about this at length. He's written books and books and books about it. And I've talked about it on my show. And I'm not cutting Black people slack. I'm not going, oh, you were in slavery, so therefore that explains, the high rate of fatherlessness. I'm like, no, you need to get your act together, right? If you're a dad, act like one. And I don't care if you're Black or you're white, you're Native American, Irish, whatever. Doesn't matter. If you're a dad, act like it. Period. Okay? But that doesn't mean that I can't also at the same time go, yeah, these policies are contributing to that. They're offering incentives. Because as a libertarian, which I saw somebody in here, they were scoffing at me. They were like, where is that? I missed it. I lost it. There's too many comments in here and I can't keep up with. Oh, yeah, here it is. Typical libertarian. Yes, I am a typical libertarian. I look at economics and I talk about how people respond to incentives. And everyone responds to an incentive. I've talked about that at great length all over the place, as has every libertarian. That's how my worldview operates in thinking of what's the incentive here. And we have, through policies, incentivized the Black community to behave in certain ways. Now, again, incentivized. That doesn't mean make, doesn't mean forced. That just means incentivized. You've offered it. You made it easy. You made this path easier. And people in general will take the easy path. But that doesn't mean that they're off the hook because you still made a choice. So if you are a Black person that doesn't have a father, and I know some, and they're like, look, I didn't have a father growing up, and I determined that was not going to be the case when I had kids. I decided that's what they said, right? I had one on a while back, Adam Coleman, and he said he didn't have a dad growing up. And so now he talks about dad issues, and he is a dad, and he's not an absent father. He's a very active father, and he chose willfully. So yes. Now, is it harder for some? Perhaps, right? For some, maybe not so hard. Depends. Everybody has a different personality, right? Everybody grows up in a different environment, a different circumstance. So I'm not taking any culpability, any responsibility away from people, but I'm also applying it to everyone else and saying, hey, you know what? If you want a group of people to behave better, perhaps you stop intervening and you let them figure it out. Right. And generally, this has been something that a lot of white people, more people on the right so much, have been willing to agree to. Like they'll say like, hey, we shouldn't be giving out, food stamps and doing this and doing that and blah, 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 blah. Okay. But then a lot of them will turn around and go, oh, well, it's not the white man's fault. Well, okay. Well, which is it? Should we not be doing this thing because it's a bad thing and it incentivizes people, or is it not white people's fault at all? Like, do they have no responsibility? You have to pick a lane. Pick a lane and choose wisely, because people like me, the just what do you say? Another typical libertarian. The typical libertarian will call you out, and I will say, nope. There's responsibility on all sides. We need to stop incentivizing people to with their bad behavior. We need to stop. We need to hold people accountable for incentivizing people to engage in behavior that we don't want, and then we need to hold people accountable for the behavior that they're engaging in. Hey, you knock it off. You fathered a child, go raise them. I don't want to hear your excuses. Go figure it out. And you get out of their way. Stop screwing things up for them. So yeah, we can absolutely talk about policies. And so if I'm correct, if Candace Owens was talking about policies in the 70s, right, which I said Thomas Sowell has talked about, and he points to, you can look in history and you can see where black incomes are rising in the 40s and the 50s, right? And maybe it was the 60s and 70s. But then in the 60s and 70s, you start seeing all these policies to help black people. And then what you see is you start seeing all the things that were on upward trend. Well, they start going on a downward trend and they have not come back. Okay, why is that? So same question as Haiti. Why is it you had a group of people that literally came out of slavery, had nothing, couldn't read, right, all that, and they were at one point on the rise? There was a Black Wall Street in Oklahoma, an area that was so prosperous that they literally called it Black Wall Street, right? Why don't we have one today? Why don't those policies create 50 Black Wall Streets? Because they're doing the opposite. So what we need to do is go back to a time where we're not racist, but where we're not getting in the way of people. And we keep getting in the way. So you want to talk accountability? Talk about it. Or shut up. Let's get to the last one. Let's see here. This is the last video clip from Nick Fuentes.
If you're like, let's say you own a store and a black person walks in and they have a clean cut haircut and they're wearing normal clothes and they walk in standing up straight and they speak to you respect. If they say, hey, excuse me, can I have some help with something? Would any one of you say, get out of here, you black piece of shit? No. You'd say, yeah, sure. What's up, man? That goes for anything. Uber drivers, restaurants, Disneyland, water park. I mean, you name it. But no, what you hear them coming down the way because they're on speakerphone always. It's never like that. You hear them coming 3 blocks away because they're screaming on speakerphone or playing their music. I was on.
It's funny. Half my neighbors who are older and many of them are white, they walk around the neighborhood also with their cell phones on speaker very loudly, right? Like I think it's weird. Like I get it. There are loud black folk. I get that. Not denying it. There are also loud white folk. Okay. And other folk as well. It's kind of weird to me that we're focusing on the one group. And I've experienced all of them. I think it's funny because, again, if you're going to have a conversation, then if you're going to have a proper conversation, then you have to include everything. But it seems like we're cherry picking what we want to talk about. And then going, see, that stereotype is true. I just saw a black person walking down the street, with a little bit of swagger that doesn't make sense to me. And his pants hanging half down his ass, talking on his cell phone, super loud, being aggressive. And you're like, see, my worldview is correct. And it's like, well, I mean, your worldview that there are some black people that like that is correct. Yes. But your worldview seems to exclude that anybody else might do it. And they do. And you seem to not be harping and hollering about it.
Train the other day, and yeah, there's some black kid playing his music. The train is packed. Everybody's talking. You got some black kid blasting his music as loud as. The fuck is wrong with you, fucking dumbass?
Okay, so did you hear that in there? Did you hear something that he said that kind of sounds like something I said a moment ago? He said a black kid. I'm gonna jump out on a limb here, and I'm gonna say the majority of instances that people find with black folk that they don't like tend to be young males, right? So again, if we're going to have a conversation, then we're going to have it. Young males. That's not all of them, But of those who are a problem that we have an issue with, young males, I would follow that by young females after that. And then I would say you might get some older males, maybe 30s, right? There's a few of those. But I think as a rule of thumb, people temper as they age. When I was 17, if I was black, if that was the only difference, I would have been everything that he said. Probably a little bit more because I was a bit out of control. Okay. But I would have been everything that he's described so far. And I think I messed up. I think I said that that was my last clip, but that's not. How did I do that? That's crazy. Let me see here. Yeah. So did I do? Oh, maybe. Okay, you know what? Maybe I didn't get the. Okay, so there was a clip that I wanted to get, and I didn't. That's fine. We're getting toward the end of the show anyway. No big deal. So we'll get to this last clip. But the point being, let me get back on track here. So yes, some people can be too loud, and you might be able to say that it's more prominent in the black community than in the white community, and that's a fair assessment. And you know who might agree with you? Dr. Martin Luther King. I did a show a while back and I played his The Other America speech. And in there, he talks about what racism is and what it is not. It's very interesting because most people, when they talk about racism, they only talk about what it is. They don't talk about what it isn't. They don't say, here's how you can criticize a group of people without being racist. Here's how you would do it and you would be a racist. Here's how you would do it and not be a racist. You don't really see that, like for any group, right? But he did it. And one of the interesting points that he made during this speech is that he said racism, and I'm not going to be able to quote him exactly, but he's like, racism is not showing that a group of people are backwards through their behaviors and whatnot. So if you're saying like, look, there are certain behaviors that exist in this current moment, they're not necessarily inherent. They're just behaviors that exist in this moment, and we can attribute them to the world around them. Basically, they're responding to the world around them. Then that wouldn't be racist. I agree. I agree with Dr. King and probably a lot of the people in my comments coming at me. You probably do too. You probably agree with that assessment. So I'll repeat it one more time. Okay. If you see a group of people and you see some untoward behavior that you don't particularly care for, and then you can associate that and say, it seems like that behavior is a response to this or that, right? So you've got young males who are out of control because there's a lot of fatherlessness in the black community. Then we can look and say, well, it looks like fatherlessness is an issue, and it's causing a lot of young males in the black community to behave in ways that we don't like. In other words, it's not inherent. It's not because they're black. It's because of the circumstances that they're in. Now, again, that doesn't absolve anybody from culpability. You are still responsible. You're accountable for your own behavior. Okay? But that also means that we can say, yeah, there is an external force that is assisting in this, that is leading the way, incentivizing. Libertarians love talking about incentives because everybody operates on incentives. As Nick said, if somebody comes in, they're dressed appropriately. Maybe they're just dressed like this, right? They got a button-up shirt and they got some jeans on and a hat. And they walk in, they're like, hi, I'm looking for this. Do you have something like that? Most people are going to respond positively and go, oh man, let me help you out. Yeah, I got it back here. It's on aisle 2, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Right? So yeah, he's correct in that sense. The problem that Nick Fuentes has here is that he's leaving out a body of evidence, a body of information that would help balance it out so that we can point to accurate things that are causing the problem, and we can make accurate assessments about what is and isn't. Now, in case you were wondering, I said earlier that stereotypes can be funny. So I have a final clip to end the show. Okay. So this clip is of the late comedian Ralphie May, and he's at the Big Black Comedy Show in 2005. Okay. He was the only white comedian there. It was set up by black folk with black comedians and a largely black audience. And he's performed in front of a bunch of black audiences before. Like he was kind of known for, making a lot of jokes about Black culture and whatnot. So he's talking about this stereotype that we're going to remember a moment ago. He's like, oh, the loud Black people, whatever. So as it turns out, there's a joke about this. And the reason I'm going to show you this is because there is a way to talk about things that is productive. The first thing that you have to do is set your head straight. You have to recognize what is and what isn't. You have to recognize what is inherent and what may be a result of circumstances, environment around you. That's not an excuse. But again, if we're going to talk about accountability, then everybody that has any level of accountability has to be included. If you're only including one person, then you're not going to get positive results. So if you actually care about creating a better society, then you will look and say, where is the accountability that needs to be addressed in any given situation by everybody? Who all has to be held accountable? And if you just point to one group, then don't be so surprised when that group or when others look at you and say, you're a bigot. Because what you're doing is you're leaving out the accountability that needs to be shared by others, their own accountability, right? So again, if I advocate for a policy that destroys the Black home, the Black family, by the way, Black families sustain themselves all the way through up to right around the 60s. And then we start seeing the disintegration of the Black family. Like, how does that? And you're not asking these questions. Everybody's always like, oh, I'm just asking questions. You're not asking good ones. Ask some damn good ones. Ask why we saw Black families persist through slavery all the way through, even through Jim Crow. But then after that, all of a sudden, the family gets disintegrated. Why is that? How come that's not a question anybody's asking and saying, what was the cause? Were there policies that contributed? Again, contributed. Not the sole reason. At the end of the day, many Black people have said, you know what? I reject this nonsense. I'm going to go and I'm going to make my life. So they took accountability for their circumstance, for themselves, and they made the best of it. But again, we have to consider everybody in the picture. And if you're not doing that, well, then people are going to look at you in a certain way. And it's really funny. The clip that I wanted to play of Nick Fuentes, he's telling the story about how he's in an Uber and the guy knows him. And he's going on and on and on about all his ideas. And he said, I just listened. And he goes, at the end of that Uber ride, the guy was like, man, you're a pretty nice guy. You're actually not so bad. And I was like, wow, imagine that. All these people think that Nick's a racist. Why would they think that? I have no idea. Could it be his behavior, the way he talks, the things that he talks about? Could that be contributing? And that is what people see. And so then they have to go the extra mile in order to get to know him and say, wow, you're actually a really nice guy. So imagine if Nick Fuentes and all of his followers did the same damn thing and said, you know what? Let me just listen to Black people. Like that Black man, listen to Nick. And then ended up saying, yeah, you're not so bad after all. You're one of the good ones. He didn't really say that, but that's kind of the vibe I'm getting, right? So imagine if Nick and all his followers did the same exact thing, right? They listened to Black people, and Black people in turn listened to them. Where would that go? It would go somewhere positive, I can tell you that. There's a lot of evidence. I don't have time to go into it. Let's get to this last clip. I'm going to play this, and then I'm going to close the show, right? You're not going to see me again until tonight. So have a good one.
I love this, man. I love this. A lot of white friends of mine were like, if you go do you're hosting the big Black comedy show, are you going to be nervous all these Black people around? Fuck no, I ain't mad. Come on, please. I go to Black movie theaters and watch Black movies on opening day. I'm a motherfucker, straight up. I love doing that. I go there all the time. I love watching a Black movie in a Black movie theater. That's the only way to watch it, okay? For white folks who don't know, it's a little different, okay? Number one, it's gonna smell a little bit like weed. It's gonna smell a little bit like weed, but think about how good that popcorn's gonna taste. You're like, God damn, that's some good ass popcorn right there. They put Tony Sashers on that shit? What's that? A Louisiana hot sauce? God damn, that's good. That's number two. I go there all the time. I swear, I love it. I pass out watermelon now and later. It's like I'm running for office. I swear to God. You think I'm bullshitting? And that ain't even a racial thing. That's just the best damn flavor of now and later, okay? All right, some people say the orange one is, or the green one, like the apple, the green one. I don't like that shit. Looks like you turn your mouth into all green. Looks like you've been blowing Shrek. I don't want that on my resume. Fuck it, I'll say old school. I'll go watermelon. So this happened. I was in Atlanta. Okay, this happened. I went and saw a movie. Don't even remember the name of the movie, but I saw a preview and I got my $10 worth of ticket right there. They showed a preview for a movie called Open Water. You heard about this movie? Okay, all right. What it is, it's about a white couple. They say it's a true story. I don't know. I wasn't there. All right, but they say it's a white couple that goes on a honeymoon, all right, and they go offshore diving, okay, out there in the middle of the ocean, all right, and then when they pop back up, the boat is gone. They're out there floating in the middle of the fucking ocean. Okay, for those of y'all who haven't seen the preview, this is the whole movie right here. The whole preview right here. Oh my God, I totally love you. Oh my God, let's get married. It's so beautiful here. Let's go diving. Oh God. Where's the fucking boat? Where's the boat? Shark. Jellyfish. Moray eel. Barracuda. Then the screen goes black and you hear the white girl say, something just touched me. Then you say, shark. Then the white guy goes, where are you? Where are you? Open water. Now, I can't tell you everything that the couple behind me said, the black couple behind me said, because I was too busy laughing. But that's pretty much it, okay? When first thing, the brother was like, damn! Stupid ass white people, what the fuck y'all doing out in the middle of the goddamn ocean? Stupid fucking white people. I can't even swim. What the fuck you doing out there with your water wings, bitch? Stupid cracker, don't y'all know y'all get soggy in water? The black girl was like, that is some cracker shit right there out there in the middle of the goddamn ocean, scuba diving. Shit, you ain't gonna get me scuba diving. I'm gonna tell you that much right the fuck now. I don't trust all the air. I'll be needing that little ass tank. I get down to the bottom of the ocean. I'll be swimming around. Ooh, ain't this nice? I ain't never been scuba diving. The brother was like, damn, did y'all see Jaws or nothing? Okay, I am crying laughing. Because she just said scuba diving like 6 times. Okay, I'm like, oh, this bitch did not just say scuba diving. So I turned to look, okay? Now, white people, if you go there, never turn to look. This is where drama fucking happens, okay? Okay, all right, Cecily, right? You know what I'm talking about, okay? I turned to look, okay? I turned, and she was like, this woman tried to punk me out. Okay, that means, for the white folks here, that means intimidate me. She tried to intimidate me and punk me out. She like, white boy, what the fuck you looking at? You get that crazy eye right before you lose a vertebrae in your neck. You know black women, like, oh, no, you didn't, motherfucker. Okay, all right. She's right there, all right? And the reason I turn to look is I like that ghetto hairstyle. I don't see nobody here with it, but you know that ghetto hairstyle that, you know, I love black girl ghetto hairstyle. They got the fucking wall hair up front, and then it lays flat, and then there's like a spoiler from a Honda Civic back here, and there's a Toyota Starship Enterprise over in this motherfucker, then it lays flat, and it's different colors. I love that. I think it's the greatest haircut of all time. All right, so I turned to look because imagine with the fucking Starship Enterprise and the scuba diving shit, that's $20 extra right there. I gotta get somebody. I don't feel like I'm cheating nobody, right? So I turned, right? And she's like, boy, what the fuck you looking at? She's 145 pounds. She could have been 155 pounds. I don't know, she was sitting down. I like it like that. Anyway, okay. So she right there, okay? White boy, what the fuck you looking at? When this happens, white people, if this happens, you gotta kind of roll. You're like, whoa, ho, ho, ho. You gotta like, whoa, ho, ho, ho. Okay? Because this is a very precarious place you're in right now. This is a danger could happen. Danger, danger. You gotta know how to handle some shit. So I was like, shit, I was just agreeing with y'all, stupid ass crackers out in the middle of the goddamn ocean, scuba diving. Shit, you ain't gonna get me scuba diving. I was gonna tell you that much fucking right the fuck now. I ain't scuba diving. Now I fucked around and gone snorkeling a couple of times. I've been snorkeling. But when you snorkel, you're right there by the beach. You see a shark or something, you're like, come on in, fuck it, I'm just snorkeling, player. Y'all want a watermelon now and later?